of an intervening variable, size of the country, that led to that outcome. He also gave an example, for example, of how a bias in the sample size of one person each led to, again, distorted opinions. So we're very pleased to be able to have a panel today that is devoted to informing us of how to make sure that the evidence that we want to generate are as solid as possible, and also to be as used as possible. So we're very pleased to have with us a terrific panel, and let me just introduce them quickly by roughly the order in which they'll be presenting. First is David Raitzer, Senior Economist at the Economic Research and Development Impact Department, or ERDI. We're very fond of acronyms at ADB. He's been working for more than 2 decades on research on a variety of, basically, I think I would call you an applied microeconomist. There are too many sectors here to mention. Before joining ADB, he was at the International Rice Research Institute, as well as the Center for International Forestry Research and CGIAR. So welcome. David, I'd like to introduce Denni Puspa Purbasari, who is Executive Director of the Program Management Office of Kartu Prakerja Program at the Coordinating Ministry of Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. And she was telling us yesterday that she is not really a research economist anymore because she's more of a bureaucrat like the rest of us, but I think she's lying, because from what I could understand, she still does economics very, very well. And so welcome, Denni. Ibu Denni. Marie Gaarder is Executive Director of the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, or 3IE, an organization that tries to improve the lives of poor people by, in fact, ensuring that rigorous evidence is brought to bear on decisions that affect their lives. It's an organization that's near and dear to my heart because I was there prior to joining ADB as well. Marie has published extensively, again, also as an applied microeconomist in a variety of areas. And before joining 3IE, she was at the World Bank Group, IEG. She was at NORAD and with IADB. And also, prior to joining 3IE, she was also at 3IE. Nassreena, or Nash Baddiri, is a colleague of mine as an evaluation specialist at the International Independent Evaluation Department of, or IED of ADB. And she's been joined us a couple of years ago, and in fact was if you were at the session yesterday on ADF, she was one of the leads in that. But prior to joining IED, Nash was the country director for Innovations for Public Poverty Action, IPA, one of the leading organizations on, again, using rigorous evidence and generating it for decision making. So I would just advise you, as you listen to them, to think about whether or not they're meeting Tim's 3 criteria for generators of evidence. Are they being calm? Are context, and are they being curious? So with that, David, off to you. You have each 15 minutes.
The slides. Okay, thank you, Manny, for that kind introduction and the excellent job of giving background on all of us. This presentation, just to get us on the same page, it will give us a tiny bit of review of impact evaluation, so we're talking about the same thing. It's not an Impact Evaluation 101 lecture, so you're not going to hear that again. I'm sure many of you have heard that many times. I want to explain then how we've been approaching impact evaluation at ADB, and I want to give a case example of impact evaluation-based program evolution. How a cycle of regular impact evaluations has influenced a government program. And I want to show you that we often think of impact evaluation as covering a topic and being done, and that we should move on and learn about other things. I want to show you that impact evaluation, even in a single program, is not something that's ever actually done, because programs are not the same over time. And so as those programs change, there are different effects that we need to keep learning about. So apologies for those of you who already know this, but just to get us on the same page about terminology, when we talk about impact evaluations, which I'll refer to as IEs, which is impact evaluation, not independent evaluation. These are empirical studies to quantify the causal effects of interventions and their statistical significance. They're, for example, to look at what is the effect of a scholarship program on learning or job market outcomes. What is the effect of providing microcredit on business activity or household income? What is the effect of providing electricity on the time use of households or schooling participation or educational progression? We basically have the gold standard of randomized controlled trials where we randomly provide an intervention, so we make sure that everything is similar apart from getting the intervention, and so that when we know the differences are truly due to the intervention. We also have other approaches that try to approximate this based on use of some assumptions. So they can be econometric approaches, they can be quasi-experimental approaches, but they all rely on some sort of assumptions. But when programs go to scale, those kinds of approaches become unavoidable, and of course they're unavoidable for many kinds of interventions. Impact evaluation is something that's taken off in recent years. I think you're all aware that it's taken off in the social science community. It started with medicine, spread into social sciences. It does have a long history of selected studies, but in recent years, it's really progressed exponentially. It's not only in research and social science, but it's also in the private sector that you see a similar explosion of the use of these kinds of techniques. So I'm not sure if you know, you may know, but all of you probably have been the object of an RCT, of an A/B trial. Google, Bing, Booking.com, they all run RCTs continuously by testing different versions of their websites, of their advertising, to see how it affects behavior and optimize the products that they offer. We in development have followed a similar trajectory in that not that we have that explosion, not that we can do an A/B trial in a few hours of tens of thousands of people, but we have scaled up our engagement in impact evaluation. At ADB, we started in the early 2000s supporting Dean Carlin to think about how RCTs could be applied to microfinance. IED later took more of the momentum about a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, where there were a number of propensity score-based and control function studies. And then we in the economic research, and now economic research and development impact department, started taking more of the momentum from about 2010 because we can get involved when projects are open. And so we can help turn projects into experiments, we can bring data collection in, and we can work in partnership with governments and projects actively. And we've deepened our engagement. We used to sort of provide a little support on the side. Now we see impact evaluation as really a joint responsibility with operations. And we've been expanding the numbers of studies that we've been supporting. It's now with the latest round, it will be about 45 study phase proposals that we've been engaged in, that we've supported through our own technical assistance, and we do a lot of other work under money coming from projects and elsewhere. So we take a general approach of thinking about the piloting stage and the scaling up stage of projects. At the piloting stage, when there's a new, unproven idea, then we try to randomize the rollout where we can. So if the government is interested in testing a new social protection program, such as the graduation approach, then before it's a program to provide the evidence about whether the approach would work, we do randomization, and we have a small pilot of some thousands of households, and we randomly pick who receives the intervention to test effects. And that helps us to get really rigorous effects. It also brings us as economists into thinking about the program design, into thinking through, what do we really expect of the program? How is it going to work? What is the evidence from other programs, other impact evaluations, particularly if it's replicating something? What does that tell us about what we might try now? When projects go to scale, obviously it's very difficult to randomize in most cases. Eligibility becomes open to all of those who meet the criteria for the program, et cetera. So one has to move on then to quasi-experimental approaches, which in academia are considered less clean. But this is still incredibly important because project implementation, when something is a pilot and when it goes to scale, is not the same. And understanding the effects when the program goes to scale and is not a carefully controlled pilot is incredibly important. And we still can think about randomization. It may not be of the intervention itself, but we can also think of putting some change in the program, like an A/B trial, on a randomized basis to test those kinds of improvements, even when programs go to scale. I want to give one last general point about how we approach impact evaluation before I will tell you the story of the process we've gone through in one case. The other thing we try to do, a lot of people here, you're evaluators and you think of projects rated as successful or unsuccessful. Impact evaluators often think about the average treatment effect or the average treatment effect on the treated as a test of whether a program works. For us, it's very important actually to unpack that, because there is no person who receives the average treatment effect. That's an average of the treatment effects for many different kinds of people who have different effects. And understanding the heterogeneity in the effects, who is getting bigger effects, who's getting smaller effects, who's getting negative effects, is actually where you can really learn a lot about how to make a program better. So we should move beyond the sort of summative thinking of, did the project just work or did the intervention work, but who is the intervention working for? And how can we make it work for more people better? And that's part of the story that I'll talk about. So the Philippines has a conditional cash transfer. Who here knows what a conditional cash transfer is? Okay, about half the room, so I guess I should explain a little bit. The basic idea of a conditional cash transfer is you give poor households a cash transfer. You give them money if they meet conditionalities. So the conditionalities in the Philippine health conditional cash transfer are typical of conditional cash transfer programs in that there's a grant that's given for meeting health conditionalities, and there's a grant for meeting education conditionalities, for kids going to school and attending school. And also to get the health grant, there are family development sessions that are sort of parental training or coaching sessions that are supposed to reinforce kind of the importance of human capital, of education, of health, other desirable behaviors. So this program initially was piloted as a randomized controlled trial. The randomized controlled trial was a rigorous study, and it showed the program worked as you would expect. A whole range of outcomes had significant positive effects. Maternal health services improved, Children had availed more of health services, taking vitamin A, deworming pills. There was increased spending on health and education, reduced spending actually on vice goods. There was a reduction in severe stunting. There was an increase in school enrollment and an increase in school attendance. So everything looked great off the initial RCTs. That informed the decision to take it to scale as a national program. So in 2013, there was the Wave 2 impact evaluation. The program has gone to scale now. So what you can use is a regression-based approach called regression discontinuity. So we look at basically the households that are just above and just below the eligibility cutoff according to the proxy means test. And again, that confirmed a range of positive outcomes. Increased use of health services, there were signs of improvement of nutrition outcomes, reduction of child labor. Here, there was an improved school enrollment, but more for the older kids only. That informed then the decision to expand the eligibility of the program to cover kids through senior high school. So this finding about who was benefiting from the education conditionalities then informed this major program change. Okay, so then we came in to the Wave 3 of 2018 data. And here we find some positive effects, but the picture is more nuanced. There's increased spending on clothes and food. There's no evidence of dependency still. There's increased school enrollment among older kids, which would be kind of expected off of Wave 2. There's an improvement on average in child grit, but there's also something very troubling. There's a significant increase in child stunting in program households. So there's significant negative effect on the health of small children. So the question is, how could this happen? How could a CCT that provides health and education grants lead to children being more stunted in program households than in comparison households? This motivated our follow-on research to understand how to make the program not have this negative effect. So first of all, the context of the program is that if you look, the program thinks there are no young children being born. So it was up to beneficiaries of the program to report pregnancies and childbirth to the program, for which they would receive basically no reward. They would just have more conditionalities that they would have to meet to keep getting the same health grant. So programs were not reporting young children being born, and so there's no health monitoring of young children. So now there is basically no health component to the CCT anymore. It's an education subsidy, basically. Now, on the education side, this is not yet an impact estimate, but this is what we saw in the data from the Wave 3. You see that the enrollment by age of the kids in the program households who are not being monitored for education supplies is substantially below the not 4Ps households. So could it be that the program is adversely affecting those who are not being monitored? The program has a cap of 3 kids who can receive the education grant. The program paid no attention to kids other than those who are registered and within the 3 cap. So there was no penalty if those kids don't go to school. Only a subsidy for the other kids to go to school. So this, how do I go back? Okay. This is not a causal effect. This is just a difference. The question then is, what is the causal effect on the kids who are not receiving educational subsidies or will not be eligible because the slots for educational subsidies are used up? Well, we used an approach called an instrumental variable because we knew the way that the program initially picked kids for enrollment And we could use that as an instrument for whether kids were actually enrolled. So the program basically went by the youngest kids up to older kids at the point of registration. And we used that, and we used also the birth order and the household as instruments for the younger kids, because if there are not slots left, then kids would not receive the educational subsidy. First, on enrollment, we find significant negative effects on the kids who are ineligible to get the education subsidy or will not be monitored. So there's a negative effect on enrollment, a negative effect on enrollment in high school, and there's a significant increase in age for grade. So these kids are older. They're not making progression in school like the kids in the program households. And it's concentrated in boys. We see, on the other hand, positive, significant effects on the kids who are being monitored for educational compliance and who are eligible. So clearly something is going on here. So could that also explain the nutrition outcomes? That already this reallocation of resources towards the kids who will get subsidies to go to school, that already affects the investment by households before they reach school. Our anthropometrics are on kids 5 and under, when you can easily measure things like stunting. That's before they enroll in school. And indeed, it is the case. There's a significant increase in stunting for the kids who will be ineligible for the education subsidies. And these are causal effects based on a local regression discontinuity design interacted with this instrument for monitoring eligibility. You see no such effect in the kids who are eligible. And it's concentrated only in boys, which makes sense when you think about it, because boys have higher value in the workforce. Their labor force participation and their wages are higher, and it's more likely also that fathers make decisions about resource allocation for boys. It's resource maximizing behavior to invest the household resources in the kids who are subsidized, not the kids who are not subsidized. That's where the household gets the greatest bang for the buck. And the fact that you see that concentrated in boys who have higher expected earnings in the workforce is completely consistent with what you would expect with resource maximizing behavior. So this pointed to an important reform need. The cap of only paying attention to 3 kids in the household in terms of education subsidies was leading to this negative effect, which would be masked in most effects just looking at the average. It showed up in nutrition because a large share of those kids would be ineligible. These households had been registered in 2009. Most of the young kids no longer would be eligible for the education subsidies. In the education outcomes, you would not have seen the effect until it was triggered by looking at this very strange negative effect. So this led to a series of reforms that were embedded in the follow-up project called the Expanded Social Assistance Project, including improved health conditionality enforcement, registration of children, updating of the registry under Lista Hanan 3 was agreed, that there should be education conditionality monitoring for all kids at least, so that the other kids they'd pay attention to, even if they hadn't yet agreed to increase the cap of 3. And it's continued discussion. COVID came just as we pointed out many of these things, so it slowed down.
Wind up.
Yeah, this is the last slide. Okay. So basically, there have been reforms, and now it's under discussion to have a child health grant for pregnant mothers that would help to solve much of this problem and encourage registration of young kids. At the same time as we were doing this, impact evaluation became institutionalized in the law authorizing the program with the Philippine government, so it has to be done regularly. And it also motivated, in part, another program to try and affect nutrition outcomes through food vouchers, which we're also testing in a randomized controlled trial with the Department of Social Welfare and Development And we are analyzing the data as we speak this week to give feedback to the ministry about the pilot so that it can inform scale up of the program nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So I suggest that you please hold off on your questions to David, take notes. So we'll have the whole panel present, because there might be questions that will apply to all. So may I ask Ibu Denni to make a presentation, if the speakers could stick to the 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't a good value, David, but we do have time constraints.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm here as a program owner. I'm not an evaluator. My institution is actually the implementing agency of Government Republic of Indonesia's program. It is called Prakerja. So let me start with give you some introduction what Prakerja program is before we discuss about the complexity in doing the evaluations. So Indonesia back in 2019 faced multiple challenges in labor force. So for the workers, the existing workers, whether they are employees or small business owners, we face rapid change in the demand of skills required by the job market. And not only that, workers also struggle in adapting with the change. And they have lack of capacity in order to pursue trainings or vocational trainings available in the market. On the supply side, on the training market, we do not have many good training institutions available in the country. Because Indonesia, let me give you the context, have labor force around 150 million people and spread over 17,000 islands. And then we also face problems for the job seekers. So for the job seekers, we face different quality in education outputs. So as much as 34% of Indonesian labor force actually have education, high schools or below. And not only that, our PISA score is also very low. And we also face significant number of youth not in education, employment, and also trainings, and also low female labor force participation rate. So this is actually what we face in Indonesia. And the number of unemployment is only 5%, but 95% of those who work actually not, we cannot say that they are okay, because the average of salary that they receive is only 3 million rupiah, equivalent is about 219 US dollars per month. So that's why government of Indonesia wants to give an access for all the labor force in order to take whatever courses that they required or they need in order to be able to upskill themselves and then tap to the better jobs. So what Prakerja do? So Prakerja actually give solutions that faced solutions to the problems that workers faced. So there was a survey back in 2018 that asked the workers, so what are the problems that you face when you see that trainings are important, but the fact is you do not take it? And the workers say that, number one, I don't have enough money. Of course, with $200 monthly income, it is almost impossible to purchase good quality trainings. Number two, I don't have time, because Monday to Friday I work, and then I have to attend my kids, and etc. And then the third one, I don't know what courses that I should take, what benefits for me. So Prakerja tried to solve those three problems simultaneously. Number one, we provide scholarships such that the workers can purchase any courses that they need. The second thing is that we give also a small amount of cash after the completion of the training in order to make sure that they reach the finish line. Because otherwise, we learn from many MOOC that even you pay by yourself, the number of the completion rate is very low, less than 10% actually. So without completion the training, it is almost impossible that you can basically acquire the skills. The second one, in order to solve the time constraint, we provide different kinds of trainings. So the trainings in Prakerja, or the courses available in Prakerja, very short, flexible, and we have online and offline modes that they can basically select. And the last one, to solve the problem of asymmetric information, we built an ecosystem and we adopt e-marketplace model with labor market information in there, such that everything is transparent. Like we go to eBay, for example, you buy a camera, you can compare from one seller to another seller, whether you can compare the price, you can compare the ratings, and so on. So this is the ecosystem of Prakerja, because Prakerja, you see the model is like that, and therefore we need to basically build the ecosystem of partnerships with many actors. So in Prakerja, currently we have more than 1,900 online and offline courses available in the ecosystem. All are curated by independent assessment units or assessment institutions. And those are provided by, at this moment, 336 training providers. The training providers are many, but the majority are actually from the private sectors. And then, what we see here also, Prakerja also give the information of job vacancies, because we have integration with more than 10 largest job portals in Indonesia to basically pull the information of the current state of the art of jobs that are open in the market. And because we deliver cash incentive after the completion of the trainings, that's why we collaborate with banks and also fintechs in order to basically, disperse the incentive to the account owned by each participant. So Prakerja can be accessed by students, job seekers, and current workers. Can be accessed here for the students only limited to the information, but the students actually prohibited from participating to the program, because we do not want to basically reduce the incentive of the students to go to school, and they rather to take Prakerja and leaving schools because they want to go for job. So this is the ecosystem Prakerja. We provide any kind of courses from sustainability reporting, carbon accounting, shoeing, content creation, operation of heavy machineries. We also have coding, UI, UX, and so on. So basically, the courses are curated by the independent experts and also reviewed by the business associations. So this is the look of Prakerja dashboard. So Prakerja, available at www.prakerja.go.id. You can basically also browse in your browser. And then you can register online, all the registration online. We verify the identity also online. So we have integration with the civil registry and so on. And we also do the liveness and so face recognition. And then no need to download any application, because we know the gadget owned by our citizens actually very simple. And actually, this also works for any kind of browsers. And then no physical card needed. We actually put or create 16-digit unique numbers for each participant, where we put like a balance of 3.5 million US dollar. That 3.5 million rupiah, sorry. That's equivalent to 125 US dollar per person one time. So it is not repeated annually. So every participant receive 225 US dollar only in their balance. And it is actually recorded in the 16-digit numbers. That is that is unique for everyone. So how we do selection for the participants? So we do what's so-called as batching mechanism. So we do not do like one-time enrollment, but we do batch by batch per year. On average, sometimes we have 11 batches open, sometimes 15 batches open. We inform this in our Instagram. Our Instagram at this moment followed by 4.6 million people, very noisy, because we do not do any censorship at all. So we let everybody to basically put their opinions. So what happened here is that per batch, we observed that actually the number of the registrants oversubscribed. The last batch that we opened oversubscribed by 10 times. So how do we select the participants from a bunch of registrants? We do randomization. That's why later I will discuss about RCT, because RCT is not done intentionally by segregating or doing the phase mechanism, but what we do is actually it is embedded in the selection of our participants. And then after being selected, you purchase the course, and after you purchase the course, you do the pre-test, post-test, and all the tests required. And then after you complete, you got the certificate, and you will see the information of job openings that relevant to the trainings that you just completed. Like for example, I'm done with Excel, then any jobs that require Excel will pop up in my dashboard. Well, for example, David learned how to drive truck, then definitely you will not see whatever that I see. So you see, like for example, okay, job openings for drivers. Then David can see all the job openings for drivers all over Indonesia. So this is what Prakerja do since 2020 to 2024, because the program actually started in 2020. So at this moment, the number of participants, 18.9 million. The number of registrants that are eligible and have been, verified? Almost 60 million people. So it's crazy. Our database is crazy, so big and so scary, because we need to protect by many layers, more than 7 layers that we do in order to do data protection. And Prakerja is not only big, but also in scale, but also inclusive, because we see that many of the vulnerable groups actually participated in Prakerja. And this is the evaluations, because the program is so big, so new, we do everything that we can, because otherwise it's too late. I basically use the taxpayers' money, billions US dollar, and if it is too slow to realize what's going on, it will be too costly for Indonesian government. So we do different kind of evaluations, and all of these evaluations that you see here by the external independent evaluators. So like for example, JPAL over there in June 2021 used RCT, funded by Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, and also Australian government. And then Presisi Indonesia, September 2021, funded by Japanese government and also UNDP. And Suara over there, funded by, also RCT, funded by ERDI. And then CEDS UNPAD over there, funded by the MOF and also the Central Bank Institutes, and so on. But majority surveys, they do not do RCT. Only those 4 that do RCT. Why? Because we need to have a quick checking in order to know whether we are on the right track or not. So this is the evaluation done in Prakerja. Very intense, painful, and sometimes we swim into, a lot of data and a lot of new data realization, because we have a cloud computing technology that can capture the whole user journey, and then we find the solutions quickly to our users. So we have rapid assessment. The first rapid assessment is actually 3 months after the enactment or the release of the program. This is done by TNP2K, Definite ADB, and this is the purpose is to assess the process, user perception, and the indicative or direction of the outcomes. And the second, the internal evaluation survey for users. So Pak Cahyo, Director Monitoring and Evaluation, actually lead my monitoring and evaluation, in internal monitoring and evaluation. So that is also the purpose. The number of users answer the internal evaluation survey reached 15.5 million people. And the survey actually have more than 70 questions and all recorded in our system. In order to, we learn the perception, good, bad, and then, the focus is actually different from one survey to another survey. So we do the survey only for the ongoing year. We do not do the survey for the second year, third year of the same cohort. And then for the internal survey for the partners, this is to see the impact of the program for our ecosystem, the training providers, the banks, the fintechs, and so on. And also we have national survey by the Statistic Indonesia, but disclaimers on, because they have a different sampling, different approach of running the questionnaire and so on. And then we have also user perception survey by external institution, like for example, CSIS, Cyrus, Ipsos, poll tracking, and so on. And that's also the same purpose like number one. And we also have RCT. So the RCT, again, done by the external independent organization funded by the external sources, not by Prakerja. Why? Because we need to build credibility. Because people will suspect that, you pay them, that's why the research sounds good. No, somebody else paid them, and they are good institutions, tested, have reputation in the market, that's why we believe in their credibility. And then last one, other independent studies, like for example, Smeru, World Bank, TNP, 2K, with a certain focus on the mental health, on the financial inclusion, on the process, and so on. So this is only the basic results, but you can basically read the summary of each research available in our website. So it is open, because openness is very important, so everybody can learn and we gain accountability. So 26% change from not working to working, and then the increase in average annual income, $63 US, and with the investment of only the realization of the investment, 193. So not all the benefit actually exercised by our users. Like I mentioned, 225, but used only 193. So the ROI, the conservative level is 15.5%, which is higher than the cost of fund by the government, 6.3%. So this is really a good human capital investment. But again, how much should we target up? Big question mark. I need your help. So 5% went from unregistered SMEs to registered SMEs, so it's getting more formal, but you see the result of formality is not so much in Prakerja. And for the workers, from the informal to formal workers, only 2%. And this is the last one. Oh, somebody hijacked this because I already lost my time. Yeah. No? No, not me. Yeah. So, and this is very important. So let me share my feeling, because my team, 50% of my budget is also actually for technology, IT, the software, the infrastructure, and also the persons, the engineers. I do not have vendors independently because we need to attend the system 24/7. So what happened, I feel so insecure because the existence of the engineers took a lot of job of economists. So we are under attack by engineers because of their capability to basically take the data, capture the data, and then analyze the data using whatever analysis, A/B testing and so on, boom. The system and process continuously being updated, improved, using the discussion. So every week, we have like a stand-up meeting and then regular meeting, whatever meetings, and then show new realization of the data, like this and that, and then what should we do? The hypothesis like this, and then throw to some of them, and then, that one is better results, and then, okay, roll out very quickly. So that's why I feel like, oh my God. And my belief is that outcome result from good processes. So system and processes keep improved in Prakerja. We have all the monitoring tools, course rating, pre-test, post-test, contact center. Our contact center work Monday to Monday, 8 to 8, without stop. And then we have social media monitoring, we have user journey monitoring, we have also daily posts to capture and summarize the most important statistic every day. So this is what happened in Prakerja. And then lesson learned, rapid assessment is important for new program, do more evaluation and invite independent reputable evaluators for a large program, because the money that you bet into the program is very big. And then the third one, embed evaluation in the program design. That's why Prakerja regulation required program management office to do survey. And the survey is actually also being incentivized, only $3 or $2.5 whenever people submit the answers, because the evaluation is actually pretty large. And then For the government point of view, beyond effectiveness, we have to care about the cost effectiveness. That's why it is important to do some kind of cost-benefit analysis and also ROI estimates. And then for the government, again, policy options are important. So if we want to increase the result, what option available for us? And then which option that I should take? That will be very valuable, and do it quickly. Because again, time is very important, especially if the program is actually campaign promise that will be over in 5 years. So we need to deliver results quickly and then have all the independent evaluators come with us and then, okay, do the correction as soon as possible such that at the 5th year, the program will be good. And then leverage technology for continuous improvement and communication with independent evaluators to understand the context, especially policy and regulations. Because if you just run the survey and then get the data and then plug and play using whatever the most robust methodology available in the market, I don't think that's work for Prakerja. Because Prakerja is very complex. That's why whenever there is an independent evaluator, Cahyo team will work in a close dialogue in order to understand about the change of the program, the regulation, and so on. Because if they learn by themselves, the clock is ticking. It's impossible to work just with the data independently from the side of the independent evaluators. And do share the methods and results openly such that everybody can learn and we gain accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu. Thank you very much, Ibu. And I know our speakers are so passionate about IE that we need to make sure that we keep them on time. So, Marie, or...
Well before lunch, everyone. There we are. So really excited to be here and especially in this session. And my presentation will take a slightly different tack. I will not. There will be examples of impact evaluations, but in fact, I will not tell you about the techniques. But rather, the purpose here is to talk about to what extent are they influential, and how do we know whether a program and an impact evaluation is influential? But before that, if you could go to the next slide, please. Very quickly, how many of you have heard about 3IE? Great, so that's excellent. I'm not going to tell you about us, except you heard already. One of our claims to fame is Manny Jimenez was the previous executive director. And we were mentioned in the TED Talk by Tim Harford yesterday, so that was great. Thank you, Tim. And then beyond impact evaluations and systematic reviews, what we are particularly known for are our global public evidence goods. And so in particular, I want to draw your attention to, also mentioned by Tim yesterday, our development evidence portal. I see a link there. I looked yesterday, I keep saying it has 13,000 impact evaluations. And in fact, my team have been working very hard, and it's over 17,000 impact evaluations in this portal, ready, open for you to search across sectors in the development field. And by the way, the graph in David's, the first graph you saw on the growth of impact evaluations, that was drawn from the 3IE's development evidence portal. And the authors are three of previous members of 3IE's board. And the other claim to fame is that we invented the evidence gap maps, which some of you may have heard about, and which are very nice visual presentations of evidence within themes, sub-themes, which show both where there is evidence, impact evaluations and systematic reviews, but also which interventions and for which outcomes are there gaps where there are no studies, and so you get a visual of that. So evidence gap maps for you also to check out and use. I can go to the next slide, please. Now talking about levels of influence for impact evaluations. I sort of see it at three levels. I find it useful to think about it at three levels. So one is program influence, and I think the previous example was a brilliant one of hearing how within a program itself, this is being used as an instrument to change things during the program itself, improve implementation in order to improve outcomes. So that's sort of the fast learning, as we talk about. And then there's the slower learning, you know, not that much slower, but sort of to inform decisions over time. Should I scale this program? Should I change it? Is it not working? Should I stop it, etc.? But both of those are sort of at the, you know, program influence. The second level is the institutional influence. And this is how an evaluation or a program of evaluations can influence an institution's path towards a culture of more evidence-informed practice. And that's you know, you will see, I will come back to a couple of good examples of that, but this is where, you know, a ministry, an organization is seeing how this is a useful instrument and decides, okay, I need to bring in more evidence in everything I do. And then the third level down is what I call field influence. And this is how, again, an impact evaluation or a program of such can influence the field more broadly. So this could be sort of either through an impact evaluation itself or by contributing to a body of evidence, which you heard about a couple of times already. Systematic reviews are a prime example of that. You can basically, you know, you add to the body of evidence of what we know about the effectiveness of a certain intervention, and that sort of is available to the field at large for other implementers to know what works better or not. The other is sort of more at the organizational level, that you know, you're providing an example to other organizations or to other ministries or implementers that using evidence to inform programming is useful. So this is sort of the third level. If we can go, now we're coming to the fast learning part here, and I'm not going to go into much details, but 3 examples. So the first one is the evaluation of UN Peacebuilding Fund program in Darfur. Now, as you know, the situation in Darfur and in Sudan, it's a very fragile context with extreme violence, etc., happening. It has re-emerged recently, but there was a lull after the fall of the Bashir regime in 2020. And at that point, the UN Peacebuilding Fund went in with $20 million, basically to enhance, you know, a program of interventions to enhance good governance, to provide durable solutions for the return of displaced people, and to avoid further escalation of intercommunal disputes into violent conflict. The implementing partners were the FAO, IOM, UNDP, UNHCR, UNICEF, and UN Habitat, and each was sort of doing the projects which sort of fell to them within their mandate under the sort of coordination of the UN Peacebuilding Fund. The method was a quasi-experimental research design, and what you see, the picture here is of the treatment versus control villages. So they were matched due to similarities. And if we can go to the next slide, results. There were sort of 3 levels of outcomes that had been highlighted for this program. The first outcome was on conditions for return of IDPs are established via land dispute resolutions. Oops, that was, and under that, what we found in the impact evaluation was that of the indicators that had been established, there were a few that, in fact, were found to have the desired effects, and there were some where no effects were found. And those are the ones that you see there that are, there's a line through it. So number of reports of conflicts over land went down, perceptions of effectiveness of dispute resolution mechanisms went up, but the return of IDPs reported intentions to stay in their homes. That was an area where there was no effect. Similarly, at the outcome 2 level, solutions are provided for IDPs, refugees, and hosts was the outcome. We found satisfaction with services in terms of both for sanitation and administration, but not water. Rates of school attendance by boys and girls went up. But perceptions of safety and security with no effectiveness was found. And then outcome 3, on a culture of peace is nurtured by a vibrant civil society. There, for example, the rates of participation in public meetings was not found to change. Perceptions of IDPs and return IDPs of ability to participate in activities with non-displaced neighbors, that again is a bit complicated, was also not found to change. And then interestingly, the last one, women's perceptions of their voice in local decisions went up. But the interesting thing is that the men didn't think that. So that's the question mark there. What was that going on? And of course, there's a longer story to it. Now, if you can go to the next slide, please. So here's sort of my map of these influence levels. So within the Peace Building Fund, the results have been informing programming design choices and are currently, I was still in discussion, doing that at both the headquarters level and also in the Sudan country office. Sorry, just one at a time, but it's okay, yeah. So next point is at the institutional influence level, the evaluation is also serving as a demonstration case, showing that impact evaluations can be conducted in such difficult circumstances. Interesting thing is that, and this was initially financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany, imposed on the UN Peacebuilding Fund. They were not particularly happy at the beginning. And so it's particularly interesting that over time, this experience was seen so useful that now it has ownership by the UN Peacebuilding Fund itself. And they have decided they want to create an impact hub that will be doing impact evaluations. And the first and prime example they have of such usefulness is this study. And then at the field level, the results are now also informing programming design choices in UN partner agencies, including UNICEF. So you see all 3 levels are sort of ticked. Let me go to the next quickly. Now this is the ADN Dignidad program in Colombia, which provides assistance to Venezuelan migrants and Colombian returnees. And the main interventions consist of unconditional multi-purpose cash assistance, as well as some other basic access to basic services. This is a program that is implemented by the Cash for Urban Assistance Consortium, led by the Action Against Hunger, in partnership with the Danish Refugee Council and the Norwegian Refugee Council. The method used is a regression discontinuity design. So this is where there's an eligibility score and basically the rather around vulnerability score, sorry, and just at the cutoff of where you're, you know, where the vulnerability is. So below that vulnerability score, the people are in the programs, and above it, they are not vulnerable enough to be eligible, and that cutoff is then used as the way to identify the impact of the program, because those who are just at that cutoff, just above it, are not receiving it, and the ones below are, and they can be used as a control. So if we can go to the next, please. So here, a lot of results are just after 1 to 3 months of graduation. You know, there's been an acceptance of the program, increased savings and reduced debt, increased in working hours, increased in income of approximately 15%, etc. Really strong positive effects all across the board. You can go to the next, and just one at a time. Yeah, so on the first level, the first round of evaluations showed really strong short-term impacts. And then these results supported really the continuation of the intervention model, which is currently now in the 3rd phase of implementation. And then click 2, please. Yeah, the short-term results also triggered interest from the program implementers and donors to track long-term results. And 3i is completed now a long-run tracking showing sustained but declining results after 18 months. Post-intervention on many key outcomes. And then finally on click 3, So working with 3IE and a national bank, the consortium is now experimenting with financial inclusion interventions and labor market insertion interventions, which, if proven effective, will also be taken to scale, not only in this program, but also in similar programs. So this is why it's sort of also at the field level. And then finally, the third example, India's National Rural Livelihoods Mission. This was launched by India's Rural Development Ministry in 2011 to reduce poverty through building grassroots institutions, namely self-help groups and federations. Basically we use the difference in difference regression here, where a study variation in program implementation was used to estimate the impacts of the program. So you had early versus late blocks that were incorporated into the program. And implementing partners were the World Bank and the Ministry of Rural Development. If we can go to the next. So just a couple of the results. So the NRLP improved savings by 28% and reduced dependence on informal debt by 20%. I'm just skipping some, but interestingly, women's involvement in income-generating work by secondary status increased around 60%. And then finally, what was interesting as well, though, it was that intra-household bargaining is more difficult to change, as we kind of know, but it came out in the data. And we find no impacts of the program on women's household decision-making. So if we can go to the map again. So at the program influence level, so our study guided the restructuring of the project by the World Bank. So the restructuring paper emphasized the need to ensure that the self-help groups are adequately capitalized, among others. And that's been sort of taken on board in the next phase. The Ministry of Rural Development quoted findings from 3IE's impact evaluation already 3 times in Parliament to address questions of impact. And then the evaluation experience created further appetite within the Ministry of Rural Development. Initially, it was funded by Gates. It wasn't sort of owned. Now, again, it's a story of the ministry seeing the usefulness and saying, 3IE keep working with us, and let's do a longer-term partnership here to evaluate the different phases of the program. So if we can go to next, so here you just basically to say, this is probably how it often looks and maybe should look, that you start at the program level and then it builds up. We have examples, I'm not going to give the details of them, some of them are ongoing, where I think the impact evaluation is probably going to influence the field first, it's going to maybe go into systematic reviews first, before we necessarily get take up and buy-in by the implementers. It's not always such a smooth ride. So let's say that it's not necessarily the sequencing you've seen here. And then I want to check, how many independent evaluators are in the room here? Do we have a few? Okay, so you've taken my word for it. I'm not independent. These are 3IE impact evaluations, and I'm claiming this influence, right? So one thing that is helpful, and something 3IE used to sort of have programs of impact evaluations that were quality assured by us but not done by us, and we were wondering, are they working? If we can go to the next slide, please. This is a thank you slide, but I just want to show you something. No, sorry, back. Thank you slide, please. So here is an evidence impact portal. We have been doing contribution tracing of impact evaluations funded by us but done by others, where they claim to have had influence, and we said, did you really? Is there evidence for that? Is it is there a smoking gun that this impact evaluation actually changed anything? And we have this portal. We have, through iterative approaches, we come up with 7 types of indicators of influence at the program level, at the influence at the policy level, influencing other organizations. So I would urge you to visit that portal and to see examples from, I think, 100 different cases. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marie. It's so great to see how much progress IE has made since I left. So Nash, over to you.
It's good afternoon now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there, and thank you, Manny, as well, for this panel, and thanks to my co-panelists as well for really giving us very rich perspectives on how we can maximize the use of impact evaluations. So just jumping off from what David and Marie mentioned earlier about really the rise of impact evaluations, and there's really there's really a recognition now that impact evaluations are quite important, and evidence from there can really help us inform policy decisions. But despite that, policymakers still face a challenge, and that is. And one of the biggest challenges is really applying findings from impact evaluations, particularly from one context to another, or what we call external validity. And so external validity is really being able to apply and generalize findings from one evaluation, particularly in a sample population, to another population. And so that's really one of the biggest challenges now. And what you've seen so far in some of the work in impact evaluations is that it really goes back to your theory of change and really understanding the mechanisms of your theory of change, particularly in applying evidence to policy in the context of development interventions. At the same time, it's quite important in this process to build stakeholder buy-in, and that can also be challenging, particularly when findings suggest that it could be politically difficult, or there are resource-intensive changes that need to be made to a particular program. So I'll very quickly go through an example, particularly a multifaceted livelihood program called the graduation model, also known as the graduation approach or the graduation of the ultra-poor program. And so this particular program has been rigorously evaluated in multiple contexts. There are about more than 20 randomized evaluations that demonstrated the comprehensive effects of the graduation program, effectively providing households with the necessary foundation to increase assets, transition to stable self-employment, secure improved occupations, enhance standard of living, and ultimately address issues of poverty. So in the graduation approach, this is really a package of interventions. So we have hands-on coaching, there's social integration, there's healthcare, savings, and many different aspects as well, depending on the context where it was tested and applied. It was developed by an NGO that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, called BRAC, in 2002, and this has now been implemented in different contexts as well. And so about in 2016 and to 2017, I was working with IPA, and that was the time also that we had a very close partnership with ADB to look at adapting the graduation approach to the Philippines. In this particular process of putting together the randomized evaluation for the Philippines and really looking at developing a pilot, we looked at several things. One is, of course, as Tim mentioned, really the importance of context. You know, what's happening around the program in the Philippines, looking at the social, economic, and political context as well. And that's really looking also at the theory of change of the program. And how does that lead to impact? What is the logic behind it that can be applied in this particular context? We did process evaluations during that period. That was to understand how the program can be implemented in the Philippines, particularly given its context. So for example, in the choice of livelihoods, what are the types of livelihoods that communities in the Philippines would choose, which would probably be very different from the graduation approach implementation in Peru or in other contexts as well. There was also a cost-benefit analysis looking at the costs of different aspects of the program, I would have to say that the graduation approach is quite an expensive program and also quite intensive in terms of the use of human resources. Lastly, we also did some qualitative work, really trying to understand from the perspective of the communities that were being targeted, how such a program would be applicable to them. So as I mentioned, this is really a partnership between different organizations with ADB, BRAC, the Department of Labor and Employment of the Philippines, and Innovations for Poverty Action, and really building off the many different evaluations that's been done in different contexts, and working with the DOLE's Kabuhayan, or in English, Livelihood Program, targeting poor and vulnerable households. So in adapting the Philippines pilot, we looked at different components and mechanisms of the graduation approach. So in the standard graduation model, we have participants receiving individual asset transfers, whether that's livestock, equipment, or seed capital, to expand their small businesses. In the Philippines pilot variation, we looked at both individual and group-based livelihoods. And so this involves multiple participants pooling resources, for example, to open a sari-sari store, or what we call a mom-and-pop store as well in the Philippines. The second variation is on the coaching side. So in a standard graduation model, you have participants receiving personalized coaching and mentoring on a one-to-one basis, which is, I think, one of the most expensive components of the program, particularly because you would need to have coaches and mentors, go out into the field, visit every household, which can be very expensive. And so that was actually one of the concerns raised by the Philippine government, that they may not have that intensive resource available to implement such a program. And so this pilot introduced a group coaching approach where participants that are part of a community receive guidance in a group setting rather than individually, aiming to reduce costs as well as increase social cohesion. So in terms of results, the graduation program pilot beneficiaries fared better in terms of monthly household consumption, food security, productive asset values, self-reported well-being, and others. I think it would be important to note as well that this was implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic, so there were implementation challenges, but despite that, we've seen some very positive results. And so you can see here as well that in terms of group and individual livelihoods, both have almost the same results. However, there's indication that individual livelihoods might be more effective than group livelihoods, and this could also be influenced by their choice of the livelihoods themselves and many other factors. When it comes to group and individual coaching, it's also a bit similar. However, group coaching demonstrated advantages in terms of higher consumption outcomes and lower costs. Okay. So ADB took lessons from these evaluations, and some of these are actually published in the ADB website. One is exploring alternative options for asset transfers to allow participants to purchase their own assets. And that was because during the implementation at the height of COVID, that was one of the main challenges in terms of being able to purchase these assets. Second is considering group-based coaching. As I mentioned, this was something that was new to the Philippines pilot. And as we've seen in the results, individual livelihoods was very positive, and at the same time, combining that with group coaching would be probably the most optimal of that combination. And so that was proven as the more impactful variation of the program. And third, investing in coaching and mentoring. And so that was really quite a critical component of this program, and the pilot project confirmed that as well. And so in utilizing the results of this particular impact evaluation, ADB has built on the pilot and has continuously worked with the government of the Philippines, and this time with the Department of Social Welfare and Development. The DSWD is actually implementing a program called the Sustainable Livelihoods Program, which is on top of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, or the 4 Ps that David also discussed earlier. And so one of the questions that the government has was, how do we make SLP more impactful? And so ADB worked with the DSWD to develop the Padayon SLP, which was designed to integrate components of the graduation approach into this existing government initiative, taking into account some of the issues that were already raised earlier, such as limited resources of the government when it comes to coaching and mentoring. And so the insights from the Padayon SLP have been integrated into the revised Sustainable Livelihood Program guidelines of the DSWD. And I think ADB is continuously working as well with DSWD in this regard. Other organizations as well have continued to work on the graduation approach in the Philippines. So IPA and BRAC is working with DSWD, also working as well with the Department of Labor and Employment with a similar livelihood program. And David also informed me that he is working as well on an adaptation of the graduation approach evaluation in Mongolia. And so ADB is really taking this program in many different contexts as well. And so some very quick takeaways from this experience. One is really being able to align, policy, and really tailoring evidence to the policy needs of a particular country. So government partnerships really ensure that evidence generated is aligned with current policy priorities. And so if we're thinking about using evidence, this is something very important. Second, as I mentioned, really understanding your theory of change for a program. And that means examining the mechanisms of your theory of change, assessing whether it aligns with the new context. Some implementation issues might not be present in one country, but it could be present in another country. And so your theory of change should adapt to those challenges as well. Third is going back again to the idea of context, really looking at contextual compatibility, evaluating local conditions, having that deep understanding of what the local conditions entail to support the applicability of the theory. And so if you're thinking about replication of programs, it's really looking at the various issues that you could be facing in the replication process and considering cultural, economic, social factors that might influence your outcomes. Fourth is really, again, going back to implementation feasibility, looking at local institutions. So when you're thinking about context, you're not just thinking about social, political, and economic issues, but also your implementation partner, whether it's government or an NGO, and being able to understand how they're able to carry out the intervention as planned. Fifth, going back again to M&E, it's very important to continuously gather data on how the program is being implemented. And so when evidence is prompting policy action, continuous M&E remains essential, particularly to understand whether the program is adapting to new challenges and is being effective as well. And my last point here would be about balancing different priorities. So I think one of the important points that we've learned from replicating the graduation approach in the Philippines is really thinking through the trade-offs in terms of exploring new areas to gather evidence or really refining existing programs in a particular context. And so policymakers, researchers, and development organizations must really weigh these competing priorities as well. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have failed miserably in keeping everyone to task, so we only have about 12 minutes left for Q&A. We can't really cut back on lunch because we only have an hour for lunch for the next session. So please, if you for your questions, keep them to questions. There are two mics over there. If you could just stand back. There are two microphones there. Please just go over there and stand if you want to be heard. Please identify yourselves, and maybe you could all stand in line there and one after another. So please keep track of the questions, and please keep the questions short. So go ahead, please.
My name's Yen Phạm from Vietnam, and thank you very much for all the presenters today. And I have one question for Denni on the projects in Indonesia. In the results of the projects that you evaluate, that it has 2% increasing from the informal worker to formal worker, and also 5% increasing from unregistered as MSME and also come to register. So do you think that what would be the impact if we put that results to become an objectives of the projects and also find the solution? Because at the moment we also facing the informal workers and also unregistered. And thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sven from DEVAL, German Development Evaluation Institute. Great panel this morning. Thanks so much. I have a question in terms of influencing programs. Like one aspect, and you alluded to it, but perhaps you could elaborate a bit more. To what extent you've been working with multiple arm RCTs to really try to measure the effects of different program choices, or also I think both Marie and you, David, you mentioned RDDs. So whether you also move the threshold to understand the effects of how a threshold is set, you know, moving it up or down, playing with the eligibility criteria to understand. So really to influence policy or program choices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sohini from CLEAR and JPAL South Asia. So David, great to hear the RCT 101 from you. So my question is a little bit more on the value of impact evaluation. So at the heart of what impact evaluation is trying to do is to understand causal mechanisms and probably about human behavior and how they behave, which can be generalizable. So at what point in time do we know enough about human behavior, and then we can probably think a little bit more on where the evidence gaps are, to use Mary's language. So more from a utility maximization perspective, what would make more sense from resource allocation? Yeah, thanks.
Hello, Tara Marwa from Innovations for Poverty Action. I have two quick questions. One is for David. You mentioned some quite negative results in the 4Ps evaluation, and I was asking if you have any advice for evaluators on how to keep buy-in with governments high, and how to kind of communicate these negative results and still keep an evaluation going. And the second question is for Ms. Denni. One program, so many evaluations, which is really unique and great for a lot of people in this room. What would you have wished from all of these different evaluators that they all did that would have made it easier for your team to actually use all of these findings? So what's kind of one practice that we could all take away to form some cohesion? Thank you.
A very rich set of questions. So if I could start with perhaps Denni, there were a couple of questions specifically, and then I'll turn to the others.
So first, for Yin from Vietnam. So the objectives of the government as mandated in the regulations is not actually about the formality. So the first priority is how Prakerja can increase the productivity of the labor force. Whatever measures of productivity defined by each researchers, we give the autonomy to the researchers. So of course, going formal is actually good for basically providing more comprehensive protections for the workers, but also in order to make sure that tax revenues actually can be gathered using this program. But we also see some research that see no correlations between formality and poverty, for example, or income. So I'm not in the comfortable position to say that formality is not important, but at least for Prakerja, that's not the first order priority. So the most important, make sure that many people have a job, especially women, because the labor force participation rate is very low, and having Prakerja is very important because women can learn from home and work from home. But when we say work from home, it's not necessarily like informal, because some of them actually work for the formal businesses, like as a customer service support, as an engineer, and so on. So, and then on the issue of thermal, with all the evaluations that take place in Prakerja, what we do here is that we often have FGDs inviting all the evaluators, because they know the inside out of Prakerja, rather than like, you know, the researchers out there. So we have FGDs involving all the researchers, and they talk about the results. And we also discuss about the plan of Prakerja in the future and listen to their inputs, because they can basically reflect to whatever findings that they know from Prakerja research. But we also have larger discussions involving greater community of researchers and from universities and also research institutes to basically also give a perspective and inputs about Prakerja, and inviting them to know more about Prakerja and have a research about Prakerja.
Thanks. If I could turn to David and Marie as well on both the questions on these influencing programs in multiple arms, but also on negative results. So, David?
Okay, thank you for the excellent question. So in terms of multi-arm RCTs, yes, we do them where it's possible. We have, for example, a multi-treatment arm with short periods of treatment with a private sector bank of Vietnam, where we keep turning over the treatment arms and changing the treatments. So we have repeated rounds and reassigning between the bank branches. We have others where we randomize a supplementary intervention on top of a program. So for example, and that may emerge after you get involved in the impact evaluation. In the graduation approach pilot in Mongolia, we then, after the baseline and seeing the initial implementation, got the idea of adding to the marketing training for program participants to build their marketing skills for their livelihood assets. So we randomly offered that to half of the recipients. The challenge with multi-arm RCTs may be that the government is not interested in trying something else, or that you don't have power because you're working with a finite number of treated units. On RDDs, in terms of moving the threshold, so actually in the Philippines, that led to involvement in Listahanan 3 and determining the PMT that would determine, and the cutoff as well. So actually we did get into generating the running variable in that case. Within the research itself, we use non-parametric local RDD, so it's more about optimizing the bandwidth rather than you can't manipulate the cutoff. For JPAL, the value of IE, like how to choose the best studies, whether you focus on sort of learning more about something you already have learned about, or whether you go into new areas and address gaps. I think this example shows a little bit of the danger of thinking in terms of gaps, because what you think you know may not be what you know. And in that case, we would have thought that kind of an intervention, we know very well how it works, so let's move on to other things. But actually it turned out that we didn't really know because the program was changing in ways that we didn't anticipate. So it's a tricky question. And in terms of keeping government buy-in with negative results, I think the important thing is that there is a ray of hope, that there is something that can be done to address the negative results, and that nothing is black and white, right? If you just find that everything is no significant effect or completely negative across all the outcomes, then I think it can be a problem. But usually that's not the case. Usually some outcomes have some effects, and for some kinds of program recipients, and so it's usually a shade of gray, and occasionally a little bit of red mixed in, but that's rare. But usually it's shades of gray, so you're working with that, and you're not trying to like dismiss the value of the program, but trying to figure out how to make it work better.
Marie, then Nash, and any other?
Right. Yeah. So thanks to the question of the multi-arm. The examples I presented, I think none of them currently were. But for example, the Colombia one, the ADI and Dignidad, the next phase that we're now trying to get off the ground and funding for, that's exactly the thought to include multi-arm. But overall, in the development evidence portal that I mentioned, where you also find all of 3IE's funded impact evaluations, but also many more, you'll find a lot of examples. And that, I would think you could also find moving the eligibility criteria, but none comes to mind right now. And I think it is an area maybe that is under potentially under researched. So that's interesting. Yeah, and I agree a bit. I mean, I think the gap idea is an, you know, it's very visually appealing, etc. But of course, I don't think that there really are fully gaps that can be, or it's hard to fill them. I think there's a couple of areas, like we know that if you condition with a certain amount of money on a certain amount of behavior, people do usually do that behavior. They will go to the health station. I mean, that's, you know, they will go to school, etc. That we found, there's a lot of impact evaluations showing that already. That's not where I would put my buck. But other than that, I think, you know, continuing to inform new programs with impact evaluations, and especially since I think we haven't found the best solutions yet. So doing cost-benefit type of work within impact evaluations to find the, you know, solutions of the future. We will just continue to have to do that. At the same time, I do want to say that I do think it would be interesting, and that's actually work that I would love to discuss doing, is starting to look across, because I do think behavior is similar across sectors. And there's a lot of synthesis that potentially could be done by sort of, breaking down the silos and see what have we learned in terms of human behavior, human incentives, etc., across sectors. So I think that's a really interesting area of work. Then I think the negative results, I agree, I think you said it really well, but it's also always about engage throughout. And I think Marvin said it last year at the conference here as well. It's like no surprises. You don't sort of come with a gotcha moment at the end, you know, and surprise everybody and go to the press first or something. You do have to sort of engage and bring people along. But then it's also how you communicate. There's ways of presenting things. There's a way of, and to sort of communicate that, you know, this is your big PR moment. You can communicate that I found something that I want to improve on. So it's about, you know, not even calling it a negative result, but it's a great opportunity for further improved benefits. So I'll stop there.
Thanks. Nash, any final thoughts from you?
Thanks. No, I just wanted to jump off from what Marie was saying about human behavior and, you know, how a lot of researchers go into, you know, running impact evaluations with the idea that, you know, we can actually look at, you know, generalize some of the results of the findings. And there have been many different ways to sort of address some of these questions. It could be on replication of the studies. Some have also looked at, you know, heterogeneous effects of a particular program and including subgroup analysis in their work. Because when you're generalizing, it could be based on the average treatment effects, which could be positive, but might be negative for a certain group of people. And so, you know, adding subgroup analysis would help. But I think also, as I mentioned earlier, it's really understanding your theory of change and the mechanisms that you have in your theory of change.
Thanks, everyone. Again, I wish we had more time for further discussion, but I think we've had a very rich set of comments. I've certainly learned a lot, and I think that there are a couple of takeaways from me, and one is that, you know, when Tim was talking about his examples yesterday, a lot of them were medical examples they're quite simple, and I think across all of these are complex, behaviorally based interventions, and we're able to evaluate them in as rigorous a way as some of those medical examples. The second is, I think that in all the examples, it's really impressive how we were engaged in all of them with the users of evidence in a way that is really quite productive. So I think that those are the takeaways that from me, but I'm sure you have your own, but please, in any case, join me in thanking our panel for a wonderful set of presentations.